healthcare costs throughout the world, and in the richest country in the world, the United States, which had sickest people in the industrialized world. They're spending the most amount of money than more than any other industrialized country. 20% of the GDP of the United States is spent on healthcare. This is not yet counting that the 40 million people in the United States have no healthcare coverage until Obamacare. Even under that system, they're not getting, they're not going to get what everybody else gets. I don't know whether that's good or bad. But wherever you look in the healthcare system, the news is bad. Where did it all begin? People 200 years ago, children used to die, 40%, up to 40% of children used to die under the age of 5. Then, starting at the beginning of the 20th century, that death rate started to come down very significantly. What caused that? It's very simple. As hygiene improved, children would not die. Instead of 40%, we used to then start to count so many children per 1,000. Now, people worry if 10 out of 1,000 children die in a society. The highest death rate in children now is in places like the Congo, Afghanistan, and situations like that, where children have to go through violence, wars, working in mines, and so on. But otherwise, the world population has increased from less than 2 billion at the beginning of the 20th century to now 7 billion. Where has the population increased? It's mostly in third world countries, but without any significant changes to their poverty or accessibility to food or healthcare. So what changed it? How come the population increased without those kinds of expenditures? It's all because of better hygiene and some more access to food, is true. And gradually, less and less wars. Certainly, the First World War, Second World War, the Vietnam War, all those kinds of wars are gone. There's still wars, but they are remote and they are handled remotely. Places like Iraq, Afghanistan, and so on. People die, but not in the millions, the way they died in the First World War, Second World War, Vietnam War, Korean War, and so on. And the population, so therefore, very little. This is just to indicate that something other than what we think has improved health. It's not drugs. that has, because those drugs are not accessible in those places where population is increased. It's not the vaccines, because those vaccines are not accessible, they didn't even exist. Where were vaccines introduced and when? Mostly after 1943, around 1948. But the death rate from measles and other diseases had already come down. We have to measure a disease by some indicator, and death is the best indicator. It's true that one disease that became more prevalent, more noticeable in around the 50s, that was polio. Polio caused havoc in the minds of people that now we say polio has been eradicated, but polio is always there. We scientists call it the disease of cleanliness. Because as hygiene was improving, then polio that was prevalent everywhere, in homes, and flush toilets were installed, but the stuff that was flushed from inside the house went to the beaches. And the kids after the war were playing there and catching polio in large numbers. Then came the polio vaccine, first the killed vaccine, then the oral polio vaccine, and the inventors of both those vaccines admitted that they were causing polio vaccine was actually causing polio. So it did not actually eradicate polio. Polio just went under, and now the same process is being repeated in other parts of the world. Actually, the WHO is saying that polio has been eradicated from the whole world except in a couple of countries, Nigeria, Pakistan, and maybe Afghanistan. They say polio has been eradicated from India. And India should worry about polio coming from the neighboring countries. That's scientifically impossible. We're living next door to each other. And vaccine, in fact, in India is causing polio. 47,000 children last year, and this is now becoming a regular annual affair, got polio, paralysis, paralytic polio. They just changed its definition. They call it flaccid paralysis. In other words, somewhat less of paralysis, but not as severe as the other polio. Same thing is happening with all the other vaccines that they have given during the last 40 to 50 years. Measles, rubella, mumps. First of all, they're minor diseases. Yes, but not with measles. There were some deaths, usually some deaths. But these diseases have been driven under. After 40 years of continuous vaccination and boosting, the diseases are still there and erupting again and again in the thoroughly vaccinated people, children, university students, or even older people. So there's something wrong here. We're being given wrong information that vaccines have eradicated disease, and we are adding more and more vaccines. Vaccines that will should not be necessary at all. We should even think of. Hepatitis B is given at birth. Hepatitis B cannot be transmitted without blood getting contaminated. How can the blood get contaminated unless you get a transfusion or a needle, dirty needle, or some other way? How can a newborn baby get hepatitis B? But they're all being given a whole series of actions. That's the vaccine. Let's put that aside for a minute. But what we have to worry about is the diseases that used to be so uncommon have become very common. There is actually pandemics of diseases that didn't used to exist in such numbers before. We have autism. Now we're saying 1 in almost 50 children has autism. Diabetes, obesity, cancer, endocrine disruption, allergies, to things like that used to be staple diet, like peanuts. You can't send a cookie to school without worrying about some child may die from peanut eating a cookie. Schools forbid you to send cookies to school with your children. Not long ago, children used to get peanut butter sandwich. That was staple diet here. Not long ago. Now everybody worries about gluten in wheat or whatever. But we've eaten wheat for 14,000 years in a very concentrated way. How come people didn't have those problems before? Where did it come from? Why is cancer increasing in children? It must be coming from somewhere. It's obviously some of it. We think when we react that it may be coming from diet, because when you get an allergic reaction after eating something, so that's coming from there. So therefore we think, oh, I'm allergic to gluten, I'm allergic to peanut butter, I'm allergic to this, I'm allergic to that. But think of nature. When we eat anything, there's only 3 things in our food supply. Those are proteins, fats, carbohydrates, and then there are, of course, vitamins and minerals, which are water soluble. Some vitamins are fat soluble. But when we eat carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, everything must be digested down to single molecules in your intestinal tract before they can be absorbed. Every protein, whether it's coming from meat or beans or milk or cheese, whatever, must be digested down to 20 amino acids. Those amino acids are absorbed into your body, and your body makes its own protein. That makes you, me, a cell of the body. Protein is a cell of existence. You cannot mix this cell with that cell. You cannot take transplant from this individual to that individual, from this animal to that person. It's just impossible. Nature does not permit that. If nature permitted that, the whole existence will collapse. There will be no existence. Evolution works on that basis. The same thing happens with fats or carbohydrates. You eat any kind of starch, it must be broken down to glucose. That's the only sugar that the body can actually utilize as source of energy. The only. If you eat fruit, then the fructose must be converted in the liver. If you drink milk, lactose, the same thing happens there. We have lactase that breaks it down. It's only glucose. Same thing happens with fats. Whatever fats, whether they're vegetable fats or animal fats, they're digested down to fatty acids, and then the liver, while it acts on them, there's sponified that become. So this gets absorbed. So you make your own fats, you make your own glycogen, you make your own protein. This is how nature operates. But if you take a mixture of all these things, you have proteins, you always make a vaccine. You take what's called antigen, has to be a protein, or something attached to a protein. Even if it's your own protein, it has to be a protein to be an antigen. Antigen makes antibody. Because your body says, oh, this is foreign. I am going to protect myself. And the body produces what's called antibody, and it takes the body a couple of weeks to do it. But if the second time around, that same protein comes, then within 24 hours, the body can produce antibody. The first is called primary antibody, the second is called secondary antibody. In the same process, there's a whole bunch of globulins in the body, immunoglobulins, that are all protective mechanisms. Allergy is a protective mechanism. It's not just a disease. Yes, it is a disease when you become allergic, but allergy is a natural phenomenon because when you sneeze, you want to get rid of that globulin. When you vomit or you get diarrhea, it's a natural way to get rid of that bug. So it's a good thing to flush it out, not suppress it. This is nature's mechanism. And so therefore there are these various globulins in the body, IgE, IgG, and so forth. I won't bother you with those technical names, because we scientists have a habit of using highly technical words to confuse people, but not really convey the real thing. The real science should be, a child should be able to understand. Certainly, if you've had high school biology, it's not difficult to understand how nature operates. So the disease mechanism is a very simple thing. Now you can make a vaccine. You take the bug. It could be bacteria. It could be virus. Now if it's a bacteria, it's a larger organism. You can grow it in milk or on beef broth or something like that, or, and so on. And then that same bug you kill by adding a chemical like formaldehyde, and then you say that's a vaccine. So if I give that injection of it, I hope then if that bug, typhoid or E. coli, whatever comes to me afterwards, then my body will quickly recognize and it will destroy that bug. That's the idea. But it doesn't work like that. The other, if it's not bacteria, then it is virus. Viruses are much, much smaller organisms, and viruses are not like bacterial cells. They're almost like pure DNA. All they do is they cannot live outside a living cell. They must go inside a living cell and confuse the DNA of the living cell to make its own DNA. That's how the parasite works. It confuses the host and then wants to live itself, and that's how it works. So the virus vaccines have to be now grown on something. And since the viruses cannot be grown outside living cells, then the only living cells that are available to us would be cancer cells, or human fetal cells, or cells normally in which vaccines are made, monkey kidney cell. Just take a monkey, catch it from the wild, chop up its kidney, and then put the virus on. 2 or 3 days later, you take it back. But in that, you also add beef broth, chicken broth, gelatin, all kinds of, and then you add mercury and you add aluminum and all kinds of things to make this vaccine work. Fish oil, various things, several dozens of ingredients, and these mercury and aluminum metals to stimulate antibody production. So when you give an injection of this material, you have bypassed the natural system. Because when a bug comes, it can enter the body only through 3 ways. Either through your mouth, or your nose, or through a cut or sexual contact, aberration, some various ways it can enter. So, but once it gets in, look at the blocks the body has. If it's not through the nose or the mouth, there is the tonsil glands. It gets trapped right away. And then if it does get through, then in the intestinal tract behind it, there's a whole bunch of series of thousands of little lymph glands. Then there's the spleen, there's all kinds of things. Then the blood cells, all white blood cells, they come and capture these bugs, and then they chew them up, and then they send a message to a little gland in the neck called the thymus gland, and that processes it. Then that sends a message to the bone marrow, and then the bone, that's where the antibody is made. But when you inject something, you bypass this whole system. Now you injected this thing with a needle, and it's gone in, and once it's inside, it explodes like a cluster bomb. And wherever it goes in all splinters, it's like a cluster bomb, like splinters of shrapnel powder, if you like. It can take whatever comes in the way, and whatever comes in the way could be knocked out. If it's pancreas, you could get diabetes. If it's your thymus, you could get obesity. If these kinds of things happen, and if there are stray viruses which we cannot prevent, let's say it comes from monkey, kidney, cortical virus, which we cannot detect, then they can cause HIV, they can cause cancers, they can cause all hepatitis, they can cause all kinds of things which we could not detect in making the vaccines. Then you add mercury. Mercury is a neurotoxin. This hits the brain and the child gets autism. So, this natural system we have bypassed, and we are hitting at internal organs, very sensitive internal organs, and done the damage. And then we keep on saying that, we're protected. Obviously, we have to protect it. Now the system has been sensitized. All flu vaccines are made in chicken egg. People become allergic to egg. So now you sensitize people, obviously not 100%, but a lot of people have been sensitized to this, that, all kinds of things. And so they get allergies, they get viruses, they get diabetes, they get obesity, all all these diseases that used to be uncommon. They used to be, yes, sure, a genetic disease, if some individuals, very minor proportion, get it naturally, that's nature's, that's God's doing. But not this huge populations getting these diseases, which we are actually creating. Now, to add insult to injury, we go to the next step. We've set the system up. Now we start doing something to our food and water. Food nowadays is grown in industrial setting, factory farming. In our food supply, there are 5 products illegally put there. When I say illegally put there, it means that under the Food and Drugs Act of Canada and the United States, anything that gets into the human body directly or indirectly must be proven to be safe and effective as described on the label by the company that sells that product. By the company that wants to sell that product. That's the law. The company that wants to sell that product must prove by conducting experiments, gathering information, gathering results, and giving them to the Minister of Health or to the FDA, whatever country they want the approval from, and this act is attached to the Criminal Code of Canada. If a company does not provide the data, then it doesn't get approved. If the company lies, then it's breaking the law. Then it's a crime. If a government official, a scientist like me, lies, says, yes, it's satisfactory when it's not, then that scientist is committing a crime. If somebody tells him to ignore it, pass it anyway, and that message may be coming from a politician, minister, prime minister, the cabinet, whoever, then they are all committing a crime. This is what is happening to our system. What are the 5 things? In our food supply today, in Canada and the United States, I'm only speaking right now of these 2 countries, because our laws are identical. There are hormones, there are antibiotics, there is slaughterhouse waste being fed back to food-producing animals. There are genetically modified organisms and the pesticides on which they depend. These 5 things, all 5, are in our food production without anybody providing safety that requires safety and efficacy data to Health Canada or the US FDA. What do they do? What can these products do? Hormones. Our body produces many hormones. We don't know, we cannot know when a hormone is produced. You eat, insulin comes into play. You wake or sleep, thyroid comes into play. Thyroxine comes in. It controls your metabolism. Women go through a periodic cycle they don't know what comes when, automatically gets triggered through a little region in the brain and controlling all these things. Hormones are very subtle chemicals in the body. They come to play when they're needed, they turn on when they're not needed. They're like chemical switches, like that. Hormones, if given when not necessary, can kill. Hormones can cause cancer. Sex hormones can change, bring aberrations to the sexual or reproductive system. We know today what's happening to the reproductive system. Girls are reaching puberty at 8 or 9 years of age. Boys are losing sperm count, becoming sterile. What's happening? Where is it coming from? Hormones are being injected into food-producing animals. Beef, all our beef. Animals are injected hormones. In fact, the transplant, the implant is put right behind the ear and is left there for life. When the animal is slaughtered, the ear is cut off and it goes into gelatin production, and from gelatin, soft candy, and kids are chewing on this hormone-laden candy. And that also goes into making gelatin capsules. The gelatin goes into your yogurt, it goes into your ice cream, it's everywhere. These ears of pigs and cows are just boiled up and gelatin is extracted. So gelatin is everywhere. Antibiotics. Antibiotics are fed and injected to food-producing animals on a mass scale. More than 75% of antibiotic use is in food-producing animals. For life, animals are injected. The animals receive not one, but a series of antibiotics in their diet and also in the water supply. And for life, to do what? To fatten the animals, to make them grow bigger, to hide infections, assumed infections. What happens? Antibiotics pass through the animal's intestinal tract, where trillions of healthy bacteria live. So antibiotic kills off the healthy bacteria. Some bacteria that are either naturally resistant or become resistant remain. Like E. coli, salmonella, and so on. And they, because they become resistant, some of them cause disease in people. And when people get that disease, then there is no antibiotic left to treat those people with any antibiotic. And that's why in the popular media they call them superbugs. Those are the superbugs that are infesting hospitals now. Terms like MRSA, VRE, these are technical words used by scientists. Once again, always saying, where are they coming from? Let's go and invent another antibiotic, except there's no more antibiotic left to invent. Antibiotics are also injected into the cow's teat canal because there's such heavy pressure to produce milk. And milk the cows with machines, and when they get damaged and they get abscesses in their teats and others, then antibiotics are injected and left there, and so therefore healthy bacteria, lactobacillus, and dyes, and staphylococci, what we call MRS and VIE. Those superbugs remain there. Farmer picks it up, go to the hospital for something else, but leaves behind his bug. The next person comes, picks up that infection and dies from it because there's no antibiotic available to the doctor anymore. That's what antibiotics do in food producing animals. Slaughterhouse waste. When you kill an animal, only half the animal is meat. The rest of the animal is waste. There's blood, there's bones, there's skin, there's hooves, horns, hair, feathers. Nowadays, all that is gathered, plus the roadkill, animals dying on the road, dogs, cats, whatever, all gathered up. They're boiled up, turned into powder, and then fed back to animals, food-producing animals, as source of protein to make them fat. Otherwise, what do we do with so much slaughterhouse waste? So they fed back to food-producing animals, including to dairy cattle. That then leads to what became the greatest scandal of this century or last century, the mad cow disease, which then called CKD. That's what slaughterhouse waste is all about. Now let's come to GMOs. This is a term that is now a household term. Nobody knows what a GMO is or how it's made, but everybody says GMOs, let's ban GMOs, let's keep GMOs. So everybody uses the term GMOs. In nature, as I said before, no two genes can be mixed from this species to another species. You can make hybrids. You can take a horse and a donkey, and you can produce a mule. But the mule then is sterile. It may look like a horse and a donkey, but it cannot make another mule. What we're doing with genetically modified organisms is we're taking the gene of a fish, putting it into the tomato, or vice versa. Or taking the gene of human or a cow, putting it into a bacteria, and producing something that the human or the cow produced. For example, humans produce insulin, and nowadays all that insulin that people use is actually manufactured in E. coli bacteria. So you take the gene, human gene that produces insulin, you put that into E. coli. E. coli thinks I am an insulin-producing factory of the human being. So it keeps on producing like beer. That comes out, that is the insulin you use. Well, that may have some, at least, reason that you're not using pig insulin or calf insulin, so you can use this. But when they came around to say that we will take the cow's gene, the bovine growth hormone, and we'll put that into the E. coli and produce the bovine growth hormone from the E. coli, and then we'll start injecting that into the cows, and the cow will give us more milk. That was something that arrived on my desk in 1988. And that was the time that I had not even thought about genetic modification at that time. But when it came, as my job required, I said, have you done any research on it? I asked the company. There were two companies, Monsanto and Eli Lilly. I asked this question, have you done any research? No, not necessary. And my colleagues said it's not necessary. It's the same hormone that the cow produces, except we produce it by genetic modification is produced by E. coli bacteria. So I said, even so, even if you took natural BGH and you start giving injections of it to the cow that doesn't need it or is excess, then the cow will get sick. It's just like if you start injecting insulin unnecessarily for people, they go into a shock and die. So I want to know, what will it do? If you do an experiment, when you start giving it in the cows, or give it to rats, we want to know what will happen to the rats. These are the kind of experiments scientists are required to do. When they actually gave it to the cows got sick, they had pus in their milk, they had their hair started to grow, their hooves and their joints and their blood, everything was, and they had multiple births and so on. And so obviously we then learned from the cows that they were getting sick. And I said, because I was in the human safety division, I said, I'd like you to do an experiment with a few rats. Give it to the rats and see if it will stimulate some other hormones, like the thyroid, like the pancreas, like the ovary. These are hormones which we can measure. This is not necessary. Why are you worried about humans? If it's present, it will be in the milk, and it's a protein, it will get digested in the stomach. I say, wait a second. Only if it's injected. But if it's digested in the stomach, you will not produce antibody. Because if it's a protein, it should produce antibody. So I argued like this, and I sent a letter to one of the companies, Eli Lilly. Meanwhile, the United States approved this product. 1993. The Europeans said, no, this is dangerous. The cows will get pus, there will be antibiotic resistance, there will be superbugs, there will be this, that, and so forth. We're not going to approve it. It should be tested. So the US FDA said, yeah, we will ask Monsanto to do this experiment, and they will let us know what happens. And the result came back. It didn't look good. The European Union had put a moratorium on it for 2 years. Canada was still sitting on it. My letter was still sitting there. We were already in 1994, and we were not approving it. And as the results were not coming, and what results came from the US didn't look good, and this is the point I went on, and now the pressure builds up inside of Canada. And our bosses are saying, how much time do you want? They're not answering. Clear. And so the pressure is going on and on. By this time, we reached 1998, 1998. And see, the way now the world works, it's not one country. They go into Geneva and they make such negotiations and the trade negotiations. Everybody forgets about health. They all are talking about money. They talk about trade, the economies and so forth. And so Canadian Director General of Food, my boss, goes to Geneva to say Canada has no objection. By this time we have filed complaints that we're being pressured to pass drugs of questionable safety, and nobody's dealing with that. And then the fact we were saying the pressure is coming from way up from the Privy Council. And this complaint, some of you have got my book today, many of you have read already, and that book describes this whole story so vividly. Because once this matter got out, the complaint became public, and now the farmers got into it, Council of Canadians got into it, Mark Barlow got into it, everybody got into the story. And they're saying, hey, there's some Health Canada scientists complaining from inside. Bring them before the Senate. And then they bring us before the Senate. We were given guarantees. Nothing would happen, because I'm saying, if we go before the Senate in public, then we're going to have to tell the truth. So under oath, you have to tell the truth. What happened? What happened was that the experiment that I had suggested had already been done by Monsanto, and the results had been given to us, but it was lying in our own department, locked up and care of one person, and nobody was allowed to touch that part. It was under lock and key. And then a meeting is occurring in Health Canada. Monsanto makes a proposal that we are willing to spend $1 to $2 million for the approval. This, my colleague was there, Dr. Margaret Hayden. She recorded this conversation and sent it out to the line. Without going too much spending time there, because I won't talk about other things, the story ultimately was that this was deliberately held back in Health Canada. And when we forced the issue, then went into the files and discovered that the results, that the experiments that I was suggesting had been done, the results that I expected were positive, and the department didn't want to look at it. And that is what came out. As a result, the recombinant or the genetically modified growth hormone, Bovine Growth Hormone, was not approved in Canada. It was not banned. It was not approved in Canada. I want you to understand this technical difference. When it's banned, then that means no milk. No milk product can come into Canada from a country where rBGH was used. And since our largest trading partner is the United States, then we did not ban, but we did not approve. So therefore, although we don't import fresh milk into Canada, but we do import cheese, butter, chocolates, dry milk to make our own chocolates. So that means really not approving in Canada didn't help us or our farmers or our cows at all. Then, the last thing that goes attached to the GMOs is the pesticides that also act like hormones, that also kill. So we've destroyed the ecology, we've destroyed the health system, all these 5 items. And everybody wants to talk about organic food, let's buy organic food, because often people don't know. They say, well, what shall we do? What can we buy? They buy organic. And organic is not organic if it's coming from California or China, because they still put other things on it to keep it looking fresh. The only organic is what I grow with my own hands or somebody I know grows, doesn't use any of these 5. I call them the 5 pillars of food safety in my book. Because if you remove those 5, automatically all food becomes organic. You don't need to testify, you don't need to verify, that's it. If you're not going to allow those 5, automatically all food becomes organic. And our country doesn't let that happen. European Union, on the other hand, has banned hormones, antibiotics, slaughterhouse waste, and they have not approved GMOs, and they are banning pesticides now. So whose food is better? Obviously the European. What we're hearing, Prime Minister Harper right now, they're all talking about trade with the Europeans. And now they're also again worried about even trade on beef as we speak with the United States. They want to know the origin of food, where is it coming from, so that they're able to trace to a specific animal, specific farm, specific slaughterhouse. But we now enter this era of industrial farming, factory farming, industrial, huge slaughterhouse, all these rendering plants, and the entire food is contaminated. The entire food system is contaminated. And so therefore, we started at one end by giving vaccines at birth, on the first few years of life, then wrecking the food system. So now you add an insult to injury. And so what we are facing is disease, chronic disease, from birth to death. People will still live. Nowadays, everybody, whether they're poor or rich, or they live in poor country or rich country, they can expect to live to pretty close to 80. And the humans have not lived more than 120 years ever. And it's described in the book of Genesis. No man's life shall last more than 120 years. So we're not wiser. Genesis 6.4. We're not wiser. Now what do we do? There has to be a solution. The solution has to be not by complaining. I know today is a very big day all over the world. March against Monsanto. And I'm saying keep marching until there is no more Monsanto. This is what we have to do. We people have to take charge of our health and the health of our children and grandchildren. And the way to do that is to say, no vaccines. Unless you prove them to be safe and effective as described in your claim, I will not give any vaccine. If you say my child cannot come to school, I don't need to sign any form, I don't need to make any plea. I just want you, whether it's a doctor who is recommending or forcing, or the school board, put down on paper here that nothing will happen to my child. Nobody will do that here in writing. They will say it's for the greater good. But you keep it home. The only good I'm interested in is in my child. I'm not interested in the greater good. You design that. Because it's illegal to keep children from not attending school. So therefore it's automatically illegal to send a child away from school. Who's at fault then? Who's breaking the law? The school board. I am going to send my child to school. You give vaccine to whoever wants. My child is no threat to anybody. When the child is sick, I'll keep the child home. I don't need to anybody. So I don't want any vaccines. Thank you very much. And I want to be in charge of my own food. We have to make all our food local. We have to take food out of the economic equation. Food should not be a commodity. Food should be grown in schools. All children must be educated around growing food. All education must be compulsory in schoolyards. There will be no shortage of food. There isn't even now. All this nonsense of feeding the hungry world is a complete lie. Because the hungry world is feeding us now. All our food is coming from abroad. China, India, Mexico, Brazil. We're not producing much food and we won't be producing in 5 years at all. Thank you very much. I said I wanted to make this interactive because this is a very educated audience. It's particularly pleasing to see that in smaller communities like this issue is now beginning to be discussed. And because you live away from the mega cities doesn't mean you're not concerned or you don't have the knowledge and you don't want to do it. In fact, these are the places where now we have to take charge. And because the city people have no idea at all. They've never seen food being grown on a cow being milked or anything like that. It's time that we do that. So, I'm in your hands. I want to work with you people. I think we as communities should come together for the sake of our children. We can do it. And this is today is a very good start.
I heard you speak about a month ago, and afterwards, when I tried to relay some of the information, I couldn't even get to first base because I was shot down because it was so absurd to the people I was talking with. How do I become informed enough, further than reading your book, that I can begin to even communicate with people about this? Because the masses are so convinced by the scientists and the experts that vaccine is very important and GMO is healthy.
Well, I think things are beginning to happen. You saw this young girl today, Rachel. It's this kind of thing that will grow. Because in Toronto, our plan is for next year, in fact, bring school kids. This year's Toronto Health Show was, I've been going there for the last 5 years, but there was a dramatic change this year. The show was larger. There were a lot of young parents. There were teenage kids, or even under 10, 12 years old kids, running around, and mothers with strollers. This was a big change. The concern is there. Right now, I have to say people don't know what to do, they get shut down. I think the time has come for us to confront those people. Corporations are actually beginning to get worried. They've done everything, they controlled everything that they could control so far. They've controlled the scientific journals, they control the medical profession, the veterinary profession, the dentistry profession. They're all part of the corruption because they make money from these products. Water supply, food, everything is contaminated. But now, if people start asking these questions, which they are in alternative media, because the media is not reporting. There's no media here today, there was no media in Toronto either. Thousands of people ask, there's no media coverage. Nobody comes. They're all on to other stories, but not about these health issues. You go to the Global Mail, they're all talking about it. And if anybody questions vaccines, go after Wakefield, go after Shiv Chopra, just fire them, get rid of them. The next thing is, now you cannot, they're making laws that you cannot label. People are asking the labels. I mean, simply, this girl raised it today saying, label GMO so that I know I don't want to buy it. They say, we don't want to label. Why? If you're selling a product, why can't you label it? The next thing that is coming is they want to put the sweetener in milk products without labeling. They're saying this is good for your health. We won't be putting as much sugar, but we're putting this NutraSweet stuff in there, but we don't want to label it. So, this is a demand that we are going to have made. There are labels on everything. I want to know what's in my food supply. Now they're saying Oh, every now and then meat gets contaminated. So they should be able to take the meat, pass it through chlorine water before it goes to people. Or irradiate it. It should be passed. And I was arguing when I was still not hired, and I'm saying, where does the E. coli come in the meat? Where does it come from? Because mile-long slaughterhouses, and they're cut by machines, the animals are cut by machines, and then the feces and urine get splashed on their bodies, and they're cut, and then this meat is turned into hamburger or sausage or pepperoni or sandwich meat, which is not even meat. It's all scrapes put together. And we don't know how this food is being processed. We want to know. So, these are the kinds of things which we have to now start taking part. The companies are getting worried about the alternative media. This is the latest. These big large corporations now are setting up their own Facebook ads and this and that to confuse people and get ghost writers to say, oh, well, you know, vaccines are good. But slowly it's getting there. We just have to continue to be aggressive about people, the discussions in community halls, churches, schools, PTAs, wherever they have to occur. City councils. These are easy places to get this discussion going and keep enlarging it. Don't forget, at least I'm reminded when I was a teenager, and we were fighting for independence in India. And much before that, Mahatma Gandhi had started a salt march with 77 people. And he wouldn't take any more. Anybody who opted out cannot replace it. And it has to be completely non-violent. And by the time, that was back in 1931, by the time independence was about to come, our parents were saying, go in the street, go fight, die if you have to. You have to get rid of the British, and we did. This is the way it's coming to that now. Because it's not now the old kind of colonization. The whole world has become one very small place. So now it's not a question of which country rules which other country. We're all one now. So it's a common problem. So I think if you ask the question, keep at it. Somebody's going to have to answer. I haven't given up, I'm still at it. So that's what we're going to have to do. I hope we repeat this, we keep doing this. I applaud Colin for taking it on himself. Good. This is an experiment. Well, that's it. Together to do this, it's a remarkable achievement what has happened today. It can't go, it should go. So thank you very much. So if there are no questions, I'm still here, but it's like a family that has come together to discuss these things. There are many health professionals here.
Still have your book available? Do you have your book available?
Yes.
I'd like to thank Shiv just for coming here. My initial conversation, I thought, you were too well known to come to a place like Coburg, and you said, no, it doesn't matter how small the audience is, we need to get the message out. And I thank you very much for coming.